FM, on digital radio, on your mobile and online. This is London Greek Radio.
Hello and welcome. We're back. I'm here with Dr. Sophia Christophi and we'll be your hosts for the next hour. Unfortunately, Dr. Chris can't be with us today, but I'm sure he's listening somewhere. So thanks for tuning in to our All About Autism show, our monthly charity show here on London Greek Radio, aimed at helping us all understand autism better so we can together create a better society for autistics and the whole community. As I said previously, I'm joined by Dr. Sophia Christophi, who is autistic, and I'm Ellie Kolatsi, a parent of twins, one of whom is autistic. So, Sophia, it feels like ages since we've been here.
Like ages, yeah. We missed last month because of Greek Easter.
Yes.
So, yeah, it does feel like there's been a big gap between episodes.
What's happening?
Not much. It's been a busy week. Lots of changes this week, lots of things to navigate.
It's that time of year, isn't it, where there is quite a few changes. Exams, transitions, perhaps work. So it's that funny kind of transitional period. I'm finding that I'm looking for school for my son, so it's all a bit hectic in our household.
Yeah. As listeners may know, on each monthly episode we focus on a different topic connected to autism, and for today's show we'll be talking about how parents can tell their child that they're autistic. This is an issue that we at the charity hear many times is of concern and confusion to lots of parents and carers. If you have anything you'd like to ask or share that we can read out and discuss live on air, please don't hesitate to send us an email. You can do this by emailing contact@londonautismgroupcharity.org. We'll be keeping an eye on your comments throughout the show, so if there's anything you'd like to say or ask, then please do. We'd also like to point listeners to the London Autism Group Charity's YouTube channel, which now has past All About Autism episodes uploaded there in case you ever miss a show and want to catch up. To find that, just go to YouTube and search for London Autism Group Charity. It's best to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes that we upload there. Ellie, many parents and carers find the question of if, how and when to tell their autistic child about their diagnosis to be a significant concern. Why do you think this issue is so challenging? And could you tell us about your experience of telling your son that he's autistic?
Yeah, sure. So this is a question that comes up quite a lot, especially at the community cafes. And it's one where I'm kind of thoughtful about things in lots of different segments. So the first one is conflicting advice. So you've got a professional perhaps telling you not to tell your child, which I think is outrageous personally, in my view, because of the stigma attached. If they're telling you that, then you're not allowing your child or young person to be authentic and to live their life with a fully blossoming, fledgling life ahead of them. Yeah. So that's the first thing. So for me, it was something that that he was diagnosed when he was 4, just before his 4th birthday. So for me, it was something that we were going to do together, and I made it my mission to bring lots of people with me. So I wanted to make sure that he had a positive outlook. So I got in touch with, of course, yourself and Chris, and that was my mission, really. And especially in the Greek community, I listened to you speaking, which was fantastic talk, by the way. And I thought, this is fantastic. If I'm going to surround myself with these people, and my son's going to see this is perfect. This is what I want to show him, that you might have some challenges, but we're going to do this together as a family, and I'm going to meet you where you are developmentally. So I'm going to show you perhaps some animations. I'm going to seek out some books, and more importantly, I'm going to talk to autistic people. And this is where the community cafes are so important, because we come together as a group of people in a non-judgmental space and a safe space for us to be able to discuss all of these things, and also it's very sensitive. I mean, I'm like 6 years down the line, and I know that there's some people who get their diagnosis and think, oh gosh, what now? Now, I urge those kind of people, reach out, because you can feel really isolated and you can feel like, what do I do? And get into this trap of, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So for me, seeking out good, positive role models, people, especially talking to autistic people, was something that for me was really important. Now, if you go down the route of not explaining to your child or young person, then that sends out a wrong message.
Yeah, I think that's keeping like a key part of their identity from them.
Yeah.
And means that you'll grow up, I guess this is the case especially for late diagnosed autistic people, is not having that explanation of why you find certain things difficult. So I suppose, how soon after receiving your son's diagnosis did you feel like it was the appropriate time to tell him, and how did you explain it to him?
I literally came out of that room and I mentioned that word. I just said, so I explained what had happened, obviously, previously, because it's really quite scary going into a room with people that you don't know, professionals, and then coming out with this diagnosis. But I kind of knew in my mind, and this is the other thing, I think parents find what to say tricky, but I felt I'd rather bumble and stumble over words rather than keep it from him.
Yeah.
That was a no-brainer for me. It was something quite natural. I wanted to tell him.
And I think there's so many more resources now aimed at all ages to make that conversation easier. And I think I'm lucky enough to get to spend time with your twins, who are both lovely. But one thing that I have noticed about your son is he does use the word autism and autistic very openly and freely. Yeah. And I think as an autistic adult, that's really nice to see and hear, because it's like he's growing up knowing his identity, and he knows that he's surrounded by autistic people, and it's just normalised.
Yes.
Which is what we hope it could be everywhere, so that autistic children don't feel isolated and alone.
I think that was really important to me. I wanted it normalised, so I wanted it to be in the conversation. I wanted it to be talked about, and I wanted it to be something that we can freely say, okay, there's something that I'm not quite sure of, let's find this out together. And also, if he asks me a question and I don't know at that time, I'm going to acknowledge what he said, and I'm going to say, I don't know, I'm going to find out, because I don't know the answers. And I think that could be potentially one of the things that could put off parents, thinking about these big questions. How am I going to tackle it? What am I going to say? I would say just be honest. Yeah,
I think there's actually something quite useful in children hearing that sort of response from their parents, because it shows that actually even the adults around us sometimes don't know everything, and that's okay. We can find things out. So I agree that giving a answer, the best answer that you can give, is better than not giving an answer at all. And now there's so many ways of getting better information. So I definitely think that one of the key things in preparing to tell your young person that they're autistic is kind of educating yourself first, feeling comfortable with the information, considering the setting and the timing and the age appropriateness and all of these things, and remembering to keep it positive and neutral. I think part of the diagnostic process in and of itself is quite daunting. It seems quite negative. Like, for example, you go to the doctors to get a referral. Yes. Like, for a young person, you go to the doctors because you're not well. Yeah. So the whole process feels like they're going to tell you that there's something wrong with you. Yeah. And then once you get that diagnosis, then all the work has to be done to explain to that person that there's nothing wrong with you. That's just how your brain works. But the way it's designed and the way it's set up isn't easy for young people to take that message on. That's it. So I know lots of young people that when they get that diagnosis, they push it away, they reject it, they don't want it, they don't want to be autistic. they want to be normal, all of these things that come out. And I think it's partly because of the diagnostic process. Because why would you think it's a positive thing when all you've had is meeting with professionals, filling out forms, people observing you? It's all very intense.
Exactly that. And something you've just reminded me of, Sophia, is not to sort of make it this big deal, like, oh, sit down, we're going to talk about something. Just kind of, it's got to be, I wanted it to be threaded and weaved into our normal conversations. Oh, look, they're autistic. Oh, look at the great things that they're doing. Oh, look at the work that they're doing. So my son listens to past LGR shows and hears your academic process. You've done your A-levels, you went to uni, you did your degree, your master's, your PhD. He actually recites all of that. So that's something in his mind that is positive. And the other thing I was going to say, sorry, it keeps triggering something again, which is interesting. If you don't tell your child or young person, then they won't get the support that they need. And for me, that was really important. So for him to get his diagnosis, he was able to get his EHCP, and we were able to get things in place for him to start primary school. Not that the EHCP is an all glowing, all fantastic document.
It doesn't solve everything.
It doesn't. However, it put things into place.
Yeah. And unfortunately, although it would be great if we were sort of a needs-led society and that wasn't the case, there are some benefits to having a formal diagnosis in terms of accessing support. But also not telling the young person means that as they're going through life and they're finding things difficult, they don't have an explanation for that. So their only explanation that they're going to think of is that it's something wrong with them.
That's right.
And that's not a nice way to grow up, feeling like you're getting everything wrong or you don't understand things, when actually it's just because your brain works differently. And if you were to meet other people whose brains work differently as well, you'll find that lots of these issues kind of are not as prevalent. So I always say to people that talk about autistic people having issues with social interaction and things like that, whenever I've worked with a group of autistic children and they're all interacting together, and I don't see no social interaction difficulties. And they're comfortable and they're happy and they know that they're autistic and they know that the other children are autistic, and the dynamic just works.
Yes.
If you don't have that information and you're constantly struggling to fit in, it's likely over time to have an impact on how your self-esteem, how you see yourself, your self-worth. So yeah, and it should just be normalised the same way people have different hair colour, eye colour. Yeah. It's literally as basic as that. Your brain just works a bit differently, as do other people's.
As do others. Everyone's different and unique. What my son does is that he gives mini talks, so he's able to present himself as saying he's autistic and these are his needs. He actually gives people the information, and if something doesn't go quite right, he'll say, well, they don't quite understand my autism, or they don't understand my communication, which he's able to verbalise. So we can have a conversation around, okay then, what do you need help with? Do you need help with what happened? Should we think about and go back to what could have been done better, or think about what it was that didn't quite go according to how you wanted it to?
Yeah, and that's setting him up to have amazing self-advocacy skills, because even at his age now, he's so open and able to discuss it so freely that even as an adult, I just think sometimes I wish I could just go up to that person and say, do you know what, these are my needs. But yeah, it's going to put him in a really good place for as he gets older, in education, in the workplace, whatever he does in the future, to be able to know what his needs are and to communicate those, means that hopefully he will be able to be supported in the right
really
place.
Important. Thank you for saying that, because I think then he spreads the word to normalise it. So also his twin is able to come on board and try and help him with his difficulties and say, oh, do you think he needs it? I think he needs to regulate himself. Because she can see when he's going to perhaps dysregulate and prevent a meltdown. But he even diagnoses dogs the other day. He went up to a dog and they were a bit scared, and he turned around and he said to me, Mum, do you think they're autistic? And I said, Well, I don't know. Quite possibly. Why do you think that? Well, they were scared of me. So, his mind is always, the possibilities are what's going on. So he's trying to figure it out. He asks other people, are you autistic? Not necessarily a good thing, but he wants to figure out who is the same like him, perhaps, in his way. And as you say, each brain works differently. So, okay, now time for a short break. Don't go away.
Welcome back, everyone. Before we continue, just a quick reminder to anyone listening that you can contact us via email at contact@londonautismgroupcharity.org with any thoughts, comments or questions.
Okay, Sophia, so as an autistic person yourself, what is your opinion on when and how, excuse me, would you have been told you were autistic?
I think that's a difficult question because it depends on the age that the person was diagnosed. So in my case, I was 16. So I was aware of what the appointments were for. I was told at the end of the appointment that I'm autistic. But really, that was it. It was just, you're autistic. I didn't really know what it meant. I was given a packet of leaflets to take home and read.
Oh, wow.
The information was really kind of generic, not particularly positive. And it was basically, you're autistic and that's it. Go.
How long ago was this?
So I was 16 and I'm 28 now. But even leading up to the diagnosis, the whole process wasn't explained very well. It all felt very negative. And I think I've realised that much more now since interacting with other autistic adults and listening to their experiences, that it's not necessarily delivered in a positive way or even a neutral way. A lot of the assessment was things that I find difficult. What do I struggle with? Lots of assumptions were made about me. So
who was it that diagnosed you?
It was an autism professional, so like a consultant.
At CAMS?
No, so I was referred on to a specialist from CAMS.
Oh, okay.
There was lots of forms that me and my mum had to fill in, and there's not really any guidance or any support during or after the diagnosis. So essentially, once you get diagnosed, in my case, it was, here's some information, you're discharged. That's it. So then you're left to your sort of own devices. At which point I turned to Google to find out stuff, and that wasn't necessarily very good either, because Googling autism, again, you're presented with a very medical model, a very sort of negative approach to understanding autism, and I've only really started to understand what it means to be autistic and to embrace it as part of my identity as an adult, and that's through interacting with other autistic people as well. And realising that it's not something that I have, it's not a collection of symptoms and all of this medical language that's used. It's just who I am. It's just that my brain is wired differently. So
but that was quite a vulnerable time, though. When you're 16, in your teens, you just want to fit in.
Yeah.
You just want to be like everyone else, and just, what is this? What is going on? And what are you talking about? So who was it that, what was the lead up to someone saying, I think you should see this person?
So the lead up was, it was picked up at school.
At school.
I was a very quiet student, liked learning, so I was happy to keep myself to myself. I was definitely a big masker, although the term masking wasn't something that was used back then, but I was very aware of feeling different, so I did everything I could to just blend into the background. But as I got to like 15, 16 and social demands increased at school and things started to change much more, and there was conversations about transitions and moving on and all of these things, I wasn't coping anymore. And it was picked up by a member of staff, and we had some conversations, and he said that I reminded him of some other students that he'd worked with and that they were autistic, and had I considered the possibility that I might be autistic.
And did you know what that term was?
I had no idea what autism was. I didn't know what it meant to be autistic. I don't think I'd met an autistic person at that point.
Well, not the diagnosed ones.
No, exactly. I probably have, but not ones that are diagnosed. And then there was lots of meetings with my mum, and we had to do a lot of reading online to see, and suddenly bits started to make sense. But then you get referred and you go through the whole process, and it's just like, for example, in my assessment, I expressed an interest in studying psychology. That's something that I always wanted to do, and the assessor said that they didn't think that would be suitable for me. So instead of kind of feeling encouraged, I was ready to abandon studying psychology. And it was lucky that my teachers knew me well enough to say, no, you can do this. It's something you want to do. Go ahead and do it. And I have done it, and I've done my PhD in it. So
amazing. It
concerns me slightly that during the diagnostic process, the information that people are receiving, whether that be the person that's being diagnosed themselves or parents about their children. So I once had a conversation with a parent who was concerned that their child might not be able to drive because they're autistic, and that was something that came out of a conversation that they had with professionals. Their child was young. There was no reason for that to be kind of suggested at that point that that they might not be able to do it. I'm just worried that people are placing limits on what people can achieve because they've got an autism diagnosis, and it shouldn't be like that. And also the diagnostic report. Obviously, I was 16, so when the letter came through, I decided to read it, and it was very negative. It was everything about what I can't do and what I struggle with. No balance in terms of, but here are some positive things. And for a lot of these young people that are diagnosed, like at your son's age, much younger, there may come a day where he asks to look at his diagnostic report. And it's just a shame that, it's a shame that it's written in such a way that it makes you feel like being autistic is something wrong.
And I think this is where parents may feel or don't have the capacity to challenge the view of what the professionals say. So what they're saying to you, Sophia, what they said to you was completely wrong, inappropriate, and you went on to smash whatever goals that you had. But if you're in that room and you come away with that report or that diagnosis, and they've said something negative, it is damaging. It's damaging to that child. You think as a parent, oh my goodness, what do I do? And then you come away a little bit downhearted, and then you start Googling, which is even worse. So that's why I made a point of not Googling and finding people, actual people to speak to. So professionals really need to up their game, I'm afraid. They really need the training in, A, how to speak to parents, and B, what they're writing in the report, because the young people, children, are going to read that report.
I guess we are lucky now in that we do have things like the community cafe, social media. It's much easier now for autistic people to connect with each other. But I would definitely say, as one of my sort of tips or advice, if you've recently told your child or young person that they're autistic, is to get them to meet other autistic people as soon as you can. Let them build those relationships, find people with similar interests. Don't let them go on feeling like they're the only one that's autistic and they're the only one that's struggling and it's going to be hard forever. Because it's not the case, and they can achieve things and they will succeed in their own way. But being able to connect with a community is probably been the most helpful thing for me out of anything else that's gone on.
No, that I completely agree with that, because something as simple as meeting, what we do once a month, my children can't wait to go. They see their friends, they meet new people come and go. It's such a lovely space to be. And again, talking to autistic people and their achievements are amazing. It's a confidence booster. It's enabling that young person or child to think, I can achieve that. That could be me. That's going to be me. I can do that.
There's still so many sort of stereotypes and misconceptions, and it really isn't until you meet autistic people, that you realise there's autistic people in every walk of life doing every career that you can think of.
Every career.
But when you're that young person and you've just been told you're autistic, especially sort of those teenage years, where you just want to fit in, like nobody wants to be different, and then you're being told but you are different because you're autistic. I think that's possibly one of the benefits of an earlier diagnosis, like in your son's case. He's growing up knowing that he doesn't know any different.
No.
Whereas I know sort of life before the autism diagnosis and life after. So it's hoped that if your young person is diagnosed and you have those conversations with them as early as you can, depending on their age, that they also grow up knowing that it's just a normal thing.
Exactly that. But I was just going back to the Greek community and thinking about perhaps not only considering what you're going to tell your child or young person, but also the outer family circle. It's trying to explain to them, not that that's going to be like the most important thing, but I think perhaps that could be a stumbling block where people are afraid to express what autism is. It's like this massive thing that is, where do I start? How do I start? How do I explain it? And again, it goes back to what I said previously about fumbling and stumbling and finding the right words. Even if you do make a mistake, you can acknowledge that and then go back and say, well, actually, I made a mistake. It's this. Or we can find out together. What do you think we can do?
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened for me and my mum. When we got the diagnosis, we didn't tell the extended family for a very long time because between us, we weren't sure how to even begin to explain it in a way that they might understand. And now, however many years later,
even now,
they're listening to me on this show. So hopefully they're kind of learning bits from here as well. But it is daunting to try and explain something like autism, because it can be complex, and you might be met with people that don't necessarily understand, or there's judgment, or, you know, but the main thing is about that autistic person and how they're going to grow up seeing themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we go for a break? And then we'll be back with tips and advice on what to say, perhaps.
Yeah.
Maybe. See you soon. Welcome back. So we've got a comment from Marie and Jimmy, and it's, I have 2 young sons and a girl, and we're looking into getting a diagnosis for one of the boys. My family have just started listening and can't wait to go to your YouTube channel to listen to the full series. Excellent. That's where you get a lot of information from. We would love to come down to Southgate Community Cafe to find out more about autism and what other services the charity has to provide and for the community. Yes, please do so. All the information is on the London Autism Group charity. Loads of information, podcast services. James will gladly answer any questions, and Chris as well. We are actually doing the community cafe this Sunday, and it's in St Andrew's Church, and the parking is in Asda, so you've got up to 3 hours free parking. From 1 to 3, come down, have a cuppa, have a chat. We'd love to meet you.
Yeah, so this is our Southgate
community. This is our Southgate community
cafe on this Sunday.
Yes, where myself and Sophia are.
Yes.
I come and say hello.
Yes.
We'd love to meet you.
So just before we finish the show, we were going to discuss some tips for telling your young person that they're autistic. So for me, if I go first and give you some of my tips, and then Ellie, if you'd like to add anything, I think it has to be done sort of in a gradual way. The first step would be to educate yourself about autism, find information that's relevant, that's helpful. You can look on the charity's website, feel comfortable in how you're going to explain autism to your child. Then I would say maybe consider the setting and the timing. So it perhaps wouldn't be a good time to tell your child they're autistic if they're kind of really dysregulated, or there's lots of other things going on, or in a busy environment. It might be more of a sort of gentle personal conversation that you want to have. depending on your child's age, using simple, clear and age-appropriate language. Again, this is something that the charity can help with if you're not sure how to start that. I would say tell them about their diagnosis in a way that's positive and neutral. Explain what autism is and relate it to their experiences. So you may say something like, when we go out and you find the noise is a bit overwhelming and crowded places are too busy, that's because you're autistic and this is what it means to be autistic. So relating it back to their experiences, but also reminding them that there are lots of other autistic people who have the same challenges. Highlight strengths, I think, is an important thing that's overlooked, and normalise differences. Keep an open dialogue with your child. If they've got questions, like we discussed earlier, if you're not sure about the answer, then say that to them and maybe you can explore it together. And to validate their emotions as well. So I know some parents, when they've told their child that they're autistic and that child has rejected the diagnosis, that they then become really concerned. And I think, depending on the child's age, especially if they're in those teenage years, that I would say that's a fairly normal response. It doesn't mean that they're always going to feel negative towards their autism diagnosis. I still think it's important that they know about it, but validate their emotion if that's what they're feeling at that particular time, and then look at ways of exploring and helping them find the sort of positive aspects and embracing it as part of their identity. And then I guess looking at resources, ways of advocating, including the young person in decisions that are made about them, things that might help them at school or at home, and join us at the community cafes and meet other autistic people. I think ultimately you want your young person to feel understood, supported and valued for who they are.
Absolutely. Yeah, just to add to that, that's a brilliant list, by the way. It's a process. Sometimes you're not running to the finishing line. It's a gradual kind of, and as you say, if the young person or child rejects it, you can always come back to it. At that time, you need that space. It is a lot of information.
Yeah.
It's sometimes overwhelm, even us as adults, parents, carers, grandparents even. It takes time to digest it, to process it, and to give it back to the young person in a way that is manageable for them.
Yeah. I think if I think back to my initial feelings after being told that I'm autistic, I don't think, first of all, I didn't really know what it meant to be autistic. So although there was a sort of an element of relief that, okay, this explains all of the things that have been going on up until this point, I didn't necessarily feel kind of any way other than neutral to it. It's only as I've got older and realised actually how important that diagnosis was at that particular time. Because I'm not sure I would have gone on to go to university or been able to access the support that I did to get to those places had I not been diagnosed when I was. And it's only as I've got older that I've kind of embraced it as a part of my identity and realised that it's just how my brain is. I don't see it as something that I have. I see it as something that I am. I am autistic. I'm happy. I'm open to talk about it. But that's definitely not where I was when I first found out about being autistic. So it does all take time. And
it alters, doesn't it? It's ebbs and flows. 1 minute you could be thinking one thing, or you're in a space where it's not possible to have that information at that time. But it's always important to come back to it, I think. It depends on the situation as well. So like being at the community cafes is a place where I don't sit there and worry about whether people are going to think there's something odd about me, or should I tell them I'm autistic or not, because it's just that safe environment. Whereas somewhere else I might mask more. I might think this isn't a safe place to kind of show that you're autistic. Could you just say a bit more about masking? So masking is where you kind of essentially try to hide your autistic traits or appear to be non-autistic when you're not. And that's really detrimental, isn't it, to your mental health? It's hard work. It's exhausting, isn't it? It is, yeah. So at the community cafe, it's not unusual to see people stimming, so flapping hands or making noises or just doing what they need to do to be comfortable. But that doesn't mean that everywhere feels like that. And I think that's why those places are really important, because
all autistic people need places where they can safely unmask and just be themselves for however long.
And I think that's a really important point, and I think that's where the carers, parents, grandparents can see that this is an amazing place for everyone to just be. And when we talk about being your authentic self, come as you are, is genuinely that. And it's not even, it's the lead up process, isn't it? So you're going to go out. I know that sometimes if I'm going to go out, I have to assess the situation, parking, who's going to be there, how long am I there for, who's going to be, it's all of that. So when you actually get there, it's a bit of a relief.
It is. And it feels like just a good place to be for a few hours where everybody accepts you as you are.
And also just to say, do you know what? I just need to frame this. How am I going to say something to my young person? Somebody might say something, not necessarily take on the exact same words, but this is my experience. I've done it this way. You can have that. You can take it on board, rejig what you're going to say, or do it completely differently. But it's those sharing of experiences.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that actually is really useful at the community cafes is the diversity there. So there's autistic adults, there's autistic children, there's parents that have recently got the diagnosis, there's parents that were diagnosed a long time ago. So the information sharing that goes on in the community cafe is kind of priceless.
It is.
And I know lots of people when they come for the first time can feel a bit anxious or apprehensive, but you take it at your own pace. So if you want to come and just observe for the few hours that we're there and not talk to anybody, that would be fine. If you want to come and ask very specific questions, that's fine too.
And also, sorry, just a really quick point is that, the parent can also relax, and when you're speaking to other parents, you could also have a diagnosis yourself as a parent.
Yeah. And
that's okay. That's the kind of realisation of, that's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, that does happen quite often. Often parents realise that they might be neurodivergent themselves or autistic themselves once their child has had a diagnosis, and in which case you're there to support yourself too.
Yeah.
So yes,
it's a win-win situation, isn't it?
We very much welcome you to our community cafes.
Yeah, very much.
And that brings us to the end of today's show. Our next show will take place on the 4th of July at 7 p.m, which, as always, is the first Thursday of every month. Hopefully, if Chris is back by then, we'll be live streaming the show onto our charity Facebook page, which is facebook.com/London Autism Group Charity. So feel free to stop by and say hi or ask a question during that show. I'd also like to remind you to pop into one of our charity community cafes to meet the community if you wish to find support and connect with others. Currently, we have community cafes in Southgate, Islington, Ealing, Woodford and Grays in Essex. We also have a monthly Autistic Adult Activity Day in the Holy Sepulchre Church in the City of London by Holborn Viaduct. All the information about these community cafes, activity days and how else the charity might be able to support you can be found on the website, which is londonautismgroupcharity.org. And a reminder that you can find recordings of these episodes on our YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube for London Autism Group Charity.
Okay, so that brings us to the end. Thank you, Sophia. That was really interesting. I'm always finding out new things myself sitting here. Thank you to the listeners. Thank you to Tony Neil-Fiddle for helping us with everything in the background. James Gordon for his editorial input. And of course, again, you lovely listeners that listen and interact with us. It's really helpful to get your feedback, so thank you. And finally, stay tuned for the amazing Antonis Procopio, who's up next. Bye.